in just a minute. Let's see if everybody can join us, and then we'll dive in.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Danny, are you cursing yourself this morning?
What's that?
Said, are you cursing yourself this morning?
What's going on?
Your name says Dan Campbell.
How do I fix this? Oh boy. It doesn't for some reason I always have to put in my name before I log in. When does
That's odd. I don't know.
Interesting. Like I don't have a fancy profile pic like all the beautiful people on the call with us. I don't know. I have to figure out why it doesn't recognize me.
Okay, no worries. Just making sure you weren't beating yourself up over there over something.
All good spirits.
Good deal. So before we dive into inspections, does anyone have any questions about a current issue? Anything we need to cover real quick? We still have a few minutes, hopefully give everybody time to join us. Okay, going to take that as a no. Let me get my screen shared.
I do have a random question.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is that the 45 group takes a splits on referrals?
No. The main office, it's your standard KW brokerage split, but if it's a personal referral to you, there wouldn't be a 4 to 5 split.
Okay. Just to like make everything clear, this is an international referral that I'm trying to do with an agent, a KW in Valencia, Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's okay. Like, it won't be anything.
So it's just going to depend on what they need from us to get you paid.
Okay.
Or probably
but technically my split my split would be with like classic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay. So today's conversation is going to be about inspections. Some of this will be good reminder info for you. Some of this might be new. So we'll have time at the end to answer any questions, or you can raise your hand if you want me to stop and dive into something a little more in depth. But we will go ahead and get started. So as your buyer's agent, you will be as the buyer's agent, you will be responsible for scheduling the inspection. 99% of the time, the buyer doesn't know an inspector, doesn't have an inspector. It's your job to inform your buyer what to expect, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to prepare them for the timeline, the expense, all of the moving pieces that is involved. So your first thing that you do once you go under contract is you schedule your inspection, because the clock is ticking. If you're open a calendar here, if you're say you get executed on the 23rd, you submit your new deal to admin on the 23rd, and that's day 0 for your inspection period. And then day 1 is the 24th. We usually shoot for a 10-day window. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So Thursday, March 5th would be your last day of inspection by 5 p.m. Now, if for some reason your inspection end date falls on a weekend or a holiday, it rolls over to the next business day. So just keep that in mind. So we always recommend shooting for a 10-day inspection window. That way it gives you opportunity to get the appropriate inspection scheduled, have time if you need to send somebody else out. So say your home inspector recommends a contractor taking a look at something. You have time still to go ahead and get that scheduled, send that additional person out.
Give me one second.
And you have time to negotiate with
¿Ya te
them.
conectaste?
Ya.
¿Con los audífonos?
Estoy en.
Let's see if we can put everybody on mute.
Okay. Sorry, thank you for reading. The 120 grams of protein. Yes.
Dora, can you mute yourself? Oh, I think I did it. Okay. So keep in mind that the inspection window is negotiable. The seller may say, well, I really don't want to wait 10 days on a response, so I want 7 days. If that's the case, so be it. Just keep in mind that giving yourself enough wiggle room to get it worked out is key. So you're going to be contacting the inspector. It's up to us to know which inspection reports are needed. At minimum, it's going to be the top to bottom home inspection. If the home is older than 20, if the home is 20 years or older, we know that insurance is going to require a 4-point. So we want to go ahead and order that at the same time. If you're using the inspection companies that we work with all the time, Inspection Solutions, for example, they know what we need, but 9 times out of 10, if you're working with somebody you're unfamiliar with or a different company, at the end of the day, if you don't tell them you're ordering a 4-point inspection, they're not necessarily going to assume that that's needed or that the buyer wants to pay for it. And then we're going to have to send the inspector back out at a higher expense and delay the process. So keep that in mind before you sit down to email the inspection company admin asking for availability. You're going to need to know which reports you need. If the house is 20 years or older, always order a 4-point as well. So that means when you're preparing your buyer in those early discussions during your showings, you're discussing the offer process, you're going to tell them, so this home was built in 1980. So when we get to the inspection, we're going to do the home inspection and a 4-point. It's usually $100 on top of the $350 or $400 home inspection report. The 4-point inspection report looks at plumbing, electrical, roof, and AC, and hot water heater. But so if there's anything that's major on those that would keep us from being able to get insurance, that's going to impact our ability to get financing. So usually the seller is pretty understanding and they'll work with you on that. Now, if you go into a home during your showings and you see a lot of problems, you're going to want to address it with the listing agent, have a conversation with the listing agent beforehand, because you want to be able to gauge how reasonable the seller is going to be. If you know your buyer has an FHA loan, for example, which that appraisal process is more stringent than a conventional loan, if there's a lot of problems, you're going to want to make sure before you get committed to a contract and before your buyer starts paying inspection fees, that we're going to be able to address the needs. If the seller says, heck no, I'm not doing anything, at that point, I go back to my buyer and say, hey, there's most likely going to be some issues, and the seller is saying that it's truly as is, they're not going to be willing to work with us. So that way it's going to be up to the buyer. Your options are, we can roll the dice and move forward with inspection and try to negotiate, see how it goes. Or I know funds are tight for you. It may be better off putting your inspection expenses and working towards getting a different property that the seller is going to be more reasonable, or that we know isn't going to need as much work, whatever the scenario might be. So as long as you're preparing them ahead of time what to expect, it makes those conversations go a lot easier. Keep in mind an VA loan will require termite WDO report. So otherwise, it's optional. I always ask my buyers if they want it. Termites live in Florida, so unfortunately, that's just a potential problem. So I would rather them find out during inspection that there's a termite problem than 6 months after moving in, and then it becomes their problem. So I always ask them if they want it. Some may want to go ahead, and some may say no, thank you. But you give them the option. But keep in mind, if you have someone, a buyer with a VA loan, again, when you're preparing them what to expect, you'll say, when it comes to inspection, I know a VA loan is going to require that termite report. So that's one of the additional inspection reports we'll order during our inspection window. It costs about $100. If it is a septic property, if it's on septic, I always recommend that my buyer does a septic tank inspection. It's costly. It'll be usually about $600 on top of your other home inspections. So that starts to add up pretty quickly for a buyer who may be working on a strict budget. If you know someone who their funds are tight, a property that it has a septic tank may not be an option for them unless it's a much newer property. You know, there's proof the septic is new, whatever it might be. But you want them to be aware of this. Deanne, do you have a question?
I do. About the termite inspection, I heard in the past that they have like a warranty on the termite inspection. So if the home has had termites in the past, is it something that the seller will do? Transfer,
Yeah,
what do
so
they call it? I can't remember.
they call it a termite bond. It's basically
Bond,
an
yes.
annual termite insurance that, hey, this property was treated, and for 1 year, we're going to guarantee termites won't come back. And then every year on that anniversary date, the seller or the owner has the opportunity for a fee to renew that termite bond. So think of it as termite insurance. I'll use an example. We have 2 rental properties side by side. At different times, they've both had termites, 2 different types of termites, which was odd. But one of them, I'm still, every year, I renew our termite bond because I had it treated and I don't want it to come back. It's like I think it might be $130 for that renewal, which means if termites ever come back, they're going to take care of it. For my other rental property, I missed my renewal date. So now if termites ever come back, I'm going to have to pay out of pocket to treat it again. Now, those termite bonds usually are transferable to the new owner. So a lot of times if the property has been treated for termites in the past, you'll see it in the seller property disclosure. So that'll be I always skim through the seller property disclosure, and if you see anything out of the ordinary, that's a red flag for you to go talk to the listing agent about it and to make sure your buyer's aware. But so that's a question for the listing agent is, hey, is there a termite bond and is it transferable?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And now, if something does come back, the document they used is called a wood destroying organisms. We just call it a termite report. But if something comes back that not only does that document cover termites, but it may be mold damage or water damage, they will want that fixed. For an FHA loan, they don't allow any water damage, wood rot damage, anything that's wood rot related that you can't quite tell what's caused it. So keep that in mind when you're showing houses and looking for houses, depending on your buyer's loan type, you're going to want to keep that in mind. Now, if you in MLS have, say you have an FHA or a VA buyer, and you in your search have selected, you've narrowed down your parameters that only houses that can go FHA. If you're doing the walkthrough and you see wood rot, that's going to be something that I might mention to the buyer and say, hey, there's a couple things that I'll want to check on to make sure that we can get handled, because your loan's probably going to have an issue with that. But wood rot is one of them for those government-backed loans. So keep that in mind. So back to our septics, we always recommend it. If it's a property on septic and they choose not to do it, we'll want them to sign. You'll want to put it in the notes when you submit that contract to New Deal, so admin can include in the KW disclosures the waiver that they chose not to. I do not want it to be my fault, or I don't want them to be able to have any reason to blame me that they bought a property on septic, they chose not to inspect the septic tank, and then it goes out a year in or 3 months into them owning it, and then they have to replace the septic tank for $13,000 or whatever it might be, because septic can be expensive. So keep that in mind for those properties. And then your other caveat here is if it's on well, USDA loans require the water to be tested. It's pretty minimal. Sam's really good at, there's a kit basically you can go. There used to be companies that would do it for you, but now it's a kit you get from the USDA office. You go get some of the water following the instructions, how they want it from different spigot locations, and then you drop it off at the USDA office. So if you ever come across that, just let me know. But it is something to keep in mind for USDA. So that process looks like you're under contract. You've already notified your buyer that, hey, we're going to be in close communication during our inspection period. I'm scheduling the home inspection report, the 4-point report, and asking for a termite report because that's what we've decided we want. I email Jackie over at Inspection Solutions or the admin for whatever inspection company you're working with. I give them the address and I say, hey, I need these 3 reports. Our inspection period ends on this date. Please let me know what you have available. So if the property is vacant, it's super easy. The inspector will say, oh, I can have someone out there Tuesday at 10 a.m. Send me the access info. Okay, great. It's vacant. All you do is send the inspector the combo lockbox or tell them that it's on an e-key. And then you give the listing agent the courtesy heads up that, hey, inspection scheduled for this date. Now, if it's occupied, hey, Rocky.
Hey, I just have a quick question about the inspection. If it's a short sale, because short sales, the price is pretty much set, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once the inspection comes back, if there's things that's wrong in there that's like major, does that matter? Can you still negotiate or no?
So you can always try to negotiate, but with short sale property, you're going to need to prepare your buyer going into it that the bank isn't going to spend any money to fix anything. So if it ends up being if it's a cash purchase, you might be able to negotiate a price reduction. If it's a finance purchase, you may be able to negotiate a price reduction as well. But if it's so major that it was something we weren't aware of when we went under contract, it might hinder your ability to get financing. And if that's the case, you may have to cancel because your buyer can't get financed. So
Got it.
you always want to discuss the different potential scenarios and hypotheticals with them so they kind of have an idea of what to expect. So if it was a house built in 1976 and they're financing their purchase, I'm going to be pretty leery unless it's, been fully renovated in the last 5 years. If it's a newer home, you may have, or recently renovated, you may have a greater level of confidence that everything will go smoothly. But it's truly, you tell your buyer, hey, it's a gamble. We can try for it. Just know you have your inspection period, that's your opportunity to cancel and get your escrow deposit back. But the bank very, very rarely does any repairs.
Yeah, because the home is built in 1938, and possibly someone's trying to get. He's like, okay, if I don't get a loan for it, I'm just going to take the equity out and then purchase it. But I was weary that it was so old, It didn't look like it from the pictures, but it was built in 1938. So I can imagine there's probably stuff wrong.
Yeah, and so a home that's that old at some point has been renovated. It's probably been renovated a couple times. So it could have all PVC plumbing. You really don't know until you send an inspector out to look at it. When you do, if you haven't shown it yet, if you haven't physically been in it, you just want to be really careful to just have not careful, but really take a deep dive look at it, run all the water, I do this at all of my showings anyway, look under the cabinets, get a feel for what you think might be an issue and if it's worth worth giving it a shot. Now with him, it sounds like if he has the cash to pay for it, great. So it's not really a big of a deal. But if you know that there's going to be probable repair needs that's going to hinder them getting financing, I'm going to tell my buyer, hey, we probably want to look at a different house that we're going to have better likelihood of it working out with.
Okay.
So back to our scheduling process. If it's vacant, you notify the listing agent, you confirm with the inspector, yep, that's great. And you give the inspector your buyer's contact info. So they will either call your buyer directly for payment, or typically they'll email a payment link. And then once they receive payment, instantly that inspection report will go through to you and the buyer. So you'll want to give them the heads up of when to expect to be contacted. Deanne?
So what if the buyer has informed us that they want to be present during the inspection process?
Yep, good question. So if they want to be present, that's fine as long as you can be there. So the buyer can never be at the property by themselves. Until they have those keys and they are the brand new owner, they cannot legally be at the property unsupervised. So when you're discussing inspections and the process with your buyer, find out if it's important for them, if they want to be there, because if that's the case, then you're going to have to work around everybody's schedule, because you're going to have to make sure you're going to have to make sure that you are available. So typically, if my buyer says, hey, I want to be at the inspection, my response is, okay, great. I'll have to be there with you. Let me find out when the inspector can go and I'll let you know. I don't let the buyer have the control of, this is when I'm available for the inspection. That causes chaos very quickly. Because our inspectors, we're working in a very short period of time, and our inspectors are usually already booked 5 to 6 days out. So if they want to be there, say, okay, great, I'll have to be there with you. Let me find out when the inspector is available, and I'll get back to you to confirm. And then I also recommend to the buyer, we don't want to get there when it first starts, because the inspector isn't going to know anything about the home yet if they haven't had time to look at it, and we don't want to be in their way. So I recommend getting there about an hour into the inspection, so at least they've had a chance to take a look at the house. And then if there are any concerns towards the end of their inspection process, they can go over those with you in person.
Oh, they are. That was going to be my next question. Is the buyer allowed to be present when we find out information from the inspector?
So
Okay.
your buyer owns that inspection report. They're the ones paying for it. That is their inspection. So yes, the inspector can, take you and the buyer and walk
Hold on.
around.
Hold on one second.
This
Sorry.
area on the ceiling has, when I tested it for moisture, it's wet. So that's going to be something on the report that we're going to need to look into. So it is really helpful, especially with a house that you anticipate having issues. It's great if you can stop by every inspection at the end, whether your buyer wants to go or not. So you can talk to the inspector and see for yourself what they're talking about. Now, once you start working with multiple deals, it's not always possible to go to your inspections. If you get the report and you have questions, you can call the inspector and say, hey, tell me more about this. You can also, when you're scheduling it, you can request that the inspector call you at the end of the inspection if there's any major concerns. Because hearing it from them directly will allow you to be able to explain it to the buyer easier and be able to discuss it with the listing agent easier in order to get the seller on board with fixing whatever needs to be fixed.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am. So we talked about if the property is vacant, it's easier to coordinate. If the property is not vacant, the inspector gives you their availability. You say, okay, let me confirm. Then you're going to get with the listing agent. They will then get with the seller. Then they'll get back to you to say, yes, that works. Now the seller knows, and the listing agent is going to prepare them that, hey, we don't really want to get in the way of this happening because we don't want to slow the process. So it's usually not an issue. But if the seller has a major conflict, then you will have to do some back and forth discussions on making sure there's an appointment date that works for everybody. And then, you one way or the other, whether it's the seller letting them in, you're giving the inspector the lockbox, or letting them know that it's on e-key. Another reminder is that for the inspector to go, the utilities have to be on. Most properties have utilities on, the water power's running, so it's not a big deal. But if you're looking at vacant properties or short sale properties or foreclosures, or it's more common for utilities to be off. If that's the case, in the listing info, it usually says utilities are not on, and it will be the buyer's responsibility to have them turned on for inspection. If your inspector gets out to the property and there's no power or water, they're going to charge the buyer a fee for going out there, and then they're still going to have to reschedule. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing a showing at a house, and if the utilities are off, that's going to be a reminder for you that you have to get that worked out prior to sending the inspector out. Most companies will do a temporary turn on. It would be that the buyer calls and gives them their information, and it may be a 3-day turn on, or they turn it on and then they leave it on until you tell them to turn it off. So every utility company operates a little differently. But in those instances, sometimes it is the buyer's responsibility for that to be turned on. Okay, let's see, where are we at? So you're going to confirm your appointment, make sure everybody knows what they need to know. You're going to update your buyer. Always make sure that they understand that if they want to go, you have to be there. And then you're going to remind them of what to expect. So, hey, good news. The inspector can go on Tuesday. They're going to reach out to you. They'll send an email for payment. As soon as that report's available, we'll both get a copy of it. Now I'm going to take a look to see if there's any major red flag issues, any major safety concerns or big ticket items. Keep in mind, the inspector is going to have a running list of maintenance items, minor things like, for example, the bedroom handle that was broken that we saw. They're going to note things that we saw when we were in there in our showing, but then the main goal is to make sure that the plumbing, the roof, the appliances are all in good working order. So the main goal of the inspector is to make sure the house is what we think it is and that there's nothing unknown hidden that we weren't able to see during the showing. But at the same time, they're going to create a list to give an overview of everything in the house. So that way, when your buyer gets the 30-page report or however long it is, they don't panic and think, oh, everything has to be done. A lot of times they get the report, if you haven't prepared them properly, and they panic and they just say, there's no way, we're not moving forward until absolutely everything is done. So that's where preparing them ahead of time really comes in handy. So I have some more info on just the different home inspection elements of it. Let's see. We talked about the 4-point, it's the big things: roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. When I'm talking to my buyers, I really use that language of the inspector's going to let us know if there's any major safety concerns or something that might hinder us from getting insurance or financing, because the little things, we can see when we're looking at the house. Now, if you have a buyer who it's a home built in 1985 and they're going to nitpick and expect everything to be brand new, then maybe they need to go for a new construction home. But that's where you're going to prepare them ahead of time and get a feel for what their expectations and needs are. One report that we haven't talked about yet is a wind mitigation report. And this is if it's an older home that has a newer roof. So if there's a roof installed in the last, I would say 5 years, a wind mitigation report is an additional $100 on top of the home inspection report, but it would be sent to insurance to say, hey, there is a new roof put on this house, and it's going to be proof of that roof being put on properly, that it has certain amount of nails, certain amount of hurricane proofing elements that are in that the inspector would have been able to see in the attic. And so this is going to save your buyer big time on their insurance premium. So just keep in mind that if it's an older home with a newer roof, we want to recommend to our buyers that they spend the extra $100 for a wind mitigation report, because it will really help them out on their insurance, on their annual premium. Now, if it's a newer construction home built within the last 10 years, then insurance is going to automatically give them that credit. And so the report isn't needed. The report comes in handy when it is an older home with a new roof. Now, if it's an old home with an old roof, this would also be a waste of money, because it's not going to it's not going to give us any bonus points with the insurance company. But that is a scenario of when it's needed. So if you're looking at houses and you notice that one of the houses had a roof put on last year, when you're at your showing or you're preparing them for what to expect, you can say, hey, by the way, when we do inspections, I would like you to get the wind mitigation report. It's $100 in addition to your home inspection and 4-point report, because we'll be able to give it to insurance and get you a great discount on your rate. Keep in mind with septic tank inspections that it's usually the buyer has to pay before they ever go to the property. And it usually looks at the tank conditions and some of the drain field, but they can't always see all of the drain field. So it's just going to depend on the type of system. Yes, Danny or Dan, sorry.
Hey, so back one slide real quick. What was that? The roofing. Isn't the wind mitt a part of the 4-point? I think you said it was additional to the 4-point.
So they make the 4-point report will basically say yes or no, we have a permit, and yes or no, it's in good. There's life left in the roof and there's no damage. The 4-point won't go as far in depth as to how the roof was installed. That's what this does.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So we went through the major reports. If there's a pool, you can let the home inspector know ahead of time that there's a pool, and they'll do their best to take a look at it. And if they have any red flags, they'll let you know. So then it may be worth going ahead and calling a pool company to go out and give you some quotes. But let them know ahead of time that you do want them to look at the pool, so they schedule enough time for the property. Because if it's a larger home with more elements, then the longer it's going to take. I've added all sorts of stuff in here. Let's see, it's 10:37. What questions do you guys have for me? And I'm going to pull up an inspection report and we can go through the example of it. But what questions do we have right now?
Yeah, do you happen to know where I could find, or maybe just Google, like the list of electrical panels that I need to be replaced? Or like you won't get insured by insurance because they're not a fire.
That's a good question. I don't know if I have that somewhere. Florida Pacific is always a big red flag. So if you see an electrical panel that's Florida Pacific, but let me make a note and I can take a look. I don't know if I have a list or not. I know at one of our training meetings last year, one of the insurance reps with Assured Partners had a lot of good info. So I feel like she did provide something, but I'll take a look and I'll send it out after. So Rocky was asking specifically about electrical panels. If there's anything electrical, because it's an older home, so there's certain types of electrical panel boxes that insurance companies know are a greater fire risk in older homes. So that may be something flagged. So it's good to keep an eye on those things as you're doing your showing and doing your walkthrough, because if you're telling your buyer, hey, this might be an issue, that might be an issue, that's going to hinder us getting insurance or hinder us in order to get your financing, you have to get insurance. Sometimes it's an insurance problem. Sometimes it's an insurance problem and an issue that would be on your appraisal. So being able to fix it ahead of time before the appraiser goes out to the property is usually my goal. If I think so, say there's a roof leak or an electrical panel that we know is a fire safety hazard. When I make those requests of the seller, I would say seller is responsible for whatever items to be fixed or replaced prior to appraisal. Sometimes your seller can't get it done that fast, and sometimes your appraiser is going to come up with something that we didn't know was a problem, and then we still have to come to an agreement and get it hashed out after appraisal. But the goal is anything in inspection that might be a problem for the buyer, if it's just a big red flag for them, or if it could affect the appraisal, we want it done prior to appraisal. So when you're making your requests, we have 2 documents that we might use. We have an inspection contingency release. We use this, say your buyer gets the inspection report back and there's no issues. They're not concerned with anything. You're not concerned with anything. Then you would complete this. You would upload this fortified document into DocuSign or Transaction Desk, and you'd put none here, and just your buyer would sign it, and we would save it to the file acknowledging that they chose to move forward, that they released their inspection contingency. Hey, Deanne.
So recently I was asked if they could do their own inspections or hire their own inspectors.
Yeah, so usually if the buyer wants a specific company, I say, okay, great. Send me their contact info and I'll coordinate, because I'll need to be the one to confirm their access to the property.
So if they want to do their own inspection, does that leave them, like, if that leaves them open to missing something, should we just tell them we suggest them to pay an inspector?
Yeah, I would say so. My recommendation is always to hire a home inspector. It's up to you how you want to handle inspections. If it's a cash buyer, they can do whatever the heck they want to do. Because my question for them would be is, well, are you going to get insurance prior to closing? Because if it's a home that's built within the last 20 years, insurance won't require that 4-point report. But if it is an older home, insurance is going to require the 4-point report in order to write the policy. So my recommendation to the buyer is, hey, let's get this done during your contract process. But if they're a cash buyer and they just want to move quickly, it's up to them how they handle it.
So what if it's a VA loan?
If it's a VA loan, they will be required to hire a termite inspector. It has to be on a specific form that the VA accepts. So it has to be by a licensed pest control company. And if it's not older, that would be the minimum requirement of outside company they would have to hire. But I would recommend a home inspection.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
So whether they are paying cash and they don't want to hire somebody, or they decided they got the reports back, they're happy with it, you'd put none here and have the buyer, you'd fill it in, have the buyer sign it, just as an acknowledgement that the buyer chose to move forward. We're moving past inspection, we're canceling that contingency. Now, if we do have repair requests from the seller, then you would type it in this box. And when we get to that, I'll help you drafting your verbiage. I do have, let's see if I have an example of one. I don't think I do at the moment, but you may put seller will repair / replace the following items prior to appraisal or prior to final walkthrough. And it may be minor things like sealing a ring on a toilet, fixing a doorknob, replacing a smoke detector. If it's bigger items, we may say seller is responsible for a licensed and insured professional to repair, replace the following items. And it may be roof or plumbing, electrical, whatever it is. Keep in mind, we would like to put repair requests for finance deals on a document that isn't going to go to the lender unless it's something that the lender is requesting. So say it's down the road, an issue that came up with appraisal, or we're going to need proof. The inspection found that the roof is shot and the seller's going to have to put a new roof on prior to closing. And we know the appraiser is going to go out there before the roof. We want proof that we already have this handled. So if you're not using, basically any repairs that are between the buyer or seller, we want you to use the inspection contingency release. If instead of an inspection repair request, if we're asking for a credit, then we would use for finance deals the addendum. There's a blank addendum, a blank addendum document to the as-is contract. So if we're going to ask for a credit in response to whatever we found in the inspection report and the buyer and the seller have agreed to it, it may say seller will contribute $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs and prepaids. Now, we won't, if it's a finance deal, we won't specifically reference inspection issues because any document the lender gets has to go through underwriting. And if we send them a document that says that there's work needing to be done or there's concerns at the property, the underwriter is going to want more information. So as we're moving through your contract to close process, just keep in mind that I'm here to help you navigate which document to use, when to use it, how to use it, and the verbiage you're putting on it. Now, if it's a cash deal without a lender involved, you can put everything on one. You can say, we want a price reduction due to inspection, and we want the seller to fix X, Y, and Z. But just keep in mind that when there's a lender involved, we don't necessarily want them knowing all of the little issues that came up in inspection. The only time they're going to know about repairs is if it's something big, like the roof being replaced. And so that basically in our inspection period is where we're going to, again, ideally take care of anything that might be an appraisal issue, take care of anything that is just a deal breaker for your buyer, or negotiate a credit. It may be that the buyer is happy to take a credit and deal with the repair on their own because they would rather be the ones overseeing the repair process instead of trusting that the seller hired someone to do it properly. Or it may be that the seller doesn't have the funds to hire someone, so they would rather give a credit, because if they're giving a credit, that means if they give a $500 credit at closing, that means it saved the buyer $500 that they don't have to bring to the closing table. So instead of paying it in closing costs, they're keeping that money to go do that repair. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions on that?
I have a question. So
Yes, ma'am.
basically, if the seller doesn't have the funds, if the buyer does the addendum to contract, they get credit to do the repair themselves. Is that going to be before or after the closing?
So if the seller's giving the buyer a credit, it's going to be because it's not an issue that is going to hinder closing. So the buyer gets a credit at closing, and then the buyer is responsible for that repair. The seller does not do any repairs.
And the buyer doesn't have to follow up showing proof they did any of the repairs or anything?
No, they're the owner.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
they own the home.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So on this, you'll see just reminders that if you have addendums that are going to the lender, number them, label them all the same. Because if you have addendum 1 and then addendum 3, the buyer's going to want addendum 2. So if you end up drafting an addendum that you don't want going to the lender, instead of numbering it, we use letters. So it would be a specific document solely between the buyer and the seller. But again, we can work through all of that together. I know that's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but basically I want you to remember that as soon as you get executed, submit your new deal, and then turn around and start working on getting your inspection scheduled. Knowing what reports insurance is going to need is very helpful. So I like to go ahead and make sure we are also working on insurance quotes. Kim will, on your behalf, email Assured Partners. They're an insurance broker. They have about 28 different carriers they can write policies with. So they've been a really great resources for our buyers. Our buyer does not have to use them. Your buyer may have someone they want to use, but getting that quote adds value. We're helping our buyer at least get comparisons, and it gives us someone right off the bat to troubleshoot with if we get a 4-point report and say, ooh, maybe this is going to be an issue. So every time I have a 4-point report, I immediately send it over to my insurance guy and say, hey, let me know what I'm going to need. I've done this long enough now that I can look at it and I'm pretty accurate in knowing what's going to be an issue and what's not. But I like to have it come from the insurance contact. That way I can forward that email to the listing agent if need be to say, hey, the buyer's happy with the home, but the only way we can get insurance is if the seller fixes this. So the more proof you have, whatever information you need to help negotiate it, the easier it makes the process. Prepare your buyer what to expect ahead of time, so they're not going to nitpick and be super difficult, because a lot of times the seller will get really unhappy. And I have seen people build deals on homes that they love because of silly things in the inspection period. And then keep in mind also, if there are red flags when you're walking through the showing, call the listing agent and talk to them about it before you ever make your offer, because it might be something that the seller is aware of and they're happy to fix, and you can put it in your offer, your initial offer, and then it's a non-issue. Or it might be something that your seller's aware of it, and if the inspector says it needs to be done, they're saying they'll be willing to handle it. Or it might be that you find out that the seller is really, really difficult, and you know the house is in bad condition, that it's not going to be a smooth process. And you may save your buyer the money and the headache, and that may not be the right house for them. So keep those conversations in mind as you're going through the process. In agent resources, let me think of where I have this. In the Working with Buyers folder, I have info on inspections, basically a copy of the ICR that we just went over, then instructions of how to schedule your inspection, contact the inspector, what to talk about, contact the listing agent, how to finalize and confirm, how to inform the buyer, reminders that the buyer can't be there alone. And then it also goes in depth of information on the specific potential reports you might need, when you would need them, and then gives you estimates so you can communicate to your buyer about what it's going to expect, why it's probably needed. Excuse me. So this is a good, helpful resource to you to reference back to when you get to that point. I will look to see, somewhere I have old info, Rocky, of red flag electrical box examples and things like that. So I will work on finding that. The other thing in the inspections info is you've made it through inspection and you have made it through appraisal. Keep in mind that when you do your final walkthrough, I want you getting your buyer to sign off on it, that they are content. Even if you do the final walkthrough on your buyer's behalf, we're going to electronically send this that they're signing off that they're happy. So when I do a final walkthrough, I take that repair request and I go through and I double check that everything was done. Sometimes it may be an instance, there's definitely been scenarios where the seller says things are done and I feel the need to stop by the house and take a look for myself. And I find that something was done poorly or something wasn't done at all. So then you have time to get it fixed prior to final walkthrough. Because if there's nothing worse than the morning of closing or the day before closing, realizing more things have to be done. So whether you had inspection question or inspection repairs, if it's a reinspection, have them sign off on this and save it. Excuse me. Have them sign it and then go ahead and send it to admin so we can save it to our file. This is a good CYA document. So it shows that they weren't coerced to go to the closing table. They were more than happy with it. Or if you get there and there is a leak or something going on, this is going to be the document you use to address it. Because if you get there for your final walkthrough and there is a major issue, you're not going to go to closing until we have it fixed, till we have a solution one way or the other. Okay, it's 10:57. So I hope that was helpful. I think I tried to be as thorough as possible, but of course, until you are going through it for the first time, it'll make a lot more sense as you're walking through it. But please do just keep in mind that you want to be having those conversations.
Caitlin, you're on mute.
How long was I on mute for?
Probably about a minute.
Oh no. I just told you all of my trade secrets. I don't
I'm
know
here to listen.
I don't know how that happened. I'm sorry, guys. Basically, keep in mind that as you get to the process, I'm here to help you because I know we went over a lot of information today. I do have a lot of lists and reminders for you. Use this guide to home ownership is a good reminder of talking points with your buyers, because the more prepared they are, the easier the process is going to be. Even if the house is a nightmare, the seller's a nightmare, the listing agent's a nightmare. If you are keeping your buyer informed and letting them know the good, the bad, and the ugly potential problems ahead of time, they're going to be happy with you. Now, if the house is a nightmare and things went terrible, but you did a poor job communicating with your buyer and giving them peace of mind that you have their back, then they're going to blame the bad deal on you. So just keep all of these things in mind as you are getting to know them at your initial appointments. Because there's a lot of buyers who you're going to see they haven't bought a house in 10 years and they don't remember the process, or they have never bought a house and they know nothing about it. So you are a resource to them. And just know that that's going to go a long way. We're not just door openers. We want to be serving them throughout the process and letting them know that they can depend on us. So utilize the resources. Call me when questions come up. When you get your inspection report, you can send it to me and say, hey, can you take a look at this? And I will, and I'll say, hey, these are the issues that might be red flags, until you get comfortable identifying those for yourself. So just keep that in mind, that I'm always here as backup. And then the last reminder, we're right at 11. I don't want to keep you guys over. There's one more reminder that I had. Oh, your timeline. Keep in mind that if you are going to request something of the seller, it has to be executed by both the buyer and seller by 5 p.m. on your last day of inspection period. If you don't send your request over until 4:58 on the last day of inspection period, then to CYA, protect our buyers' escrow deposit, I'll provide a cancellation as well. And in that email, I will be very clear in stating, here's our buyer's requests. There's also a cancellation in the event that the seller and buyer cannot come to terms to protect the escrow deposit. However, the buyer no way wants to cancel. We want to make this work. But that is how you protect your buyer's escrow if you haven't been able to already come to terms and get everything executed prior to the end of your inspection. And it may be that the seller says, I'll work on it, but I'm going to have to send contractors, or the seller's out of town, or the buyer needs to send more vendors to get quotes. So keep in mind, sometimes there's an inspection extension as well, but either an executed extension, an executed addendum, or ICR document saying how we're moving forward, or a buyer sign cancellation has to be sent prior to the end of inspection period to protect their escrow. Because if they cancel on day 12 due to inspection, they are not entitled to get their escrow deposit back anymore. Okay. I think I hit all of the highlights. So if you guys have questions, I'm more than happy to stay on. If no one has any questions, I will let you go about your day and just call me or text me when you need me. We are doing at noon a sales comps in MLS training. So if you don't have appointments and you are free, please do join me and Angel in about an hour. But other than that, you guys have a wonderful day, and I appreciate you being with me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.